Our scripture this morning is from the book of Judges, verses 4, 1 through 9, in the New Revised Standard Version. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. So the Lord sold them into the hand of King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron and had oppressed the Israelites cruelly 20 years. At that time, Deborah, a prophet, wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites came up to her for judgment. She sent and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kedesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Position yourself at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the tribe of Naphtali and the tribe of Zebulun. And I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the Wadi Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand." Barak said to her, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." And she said, "I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." Then Deborah got up and went with Barak to Kedesh.
Well, as we have learned, judges are leaders, and the phrase deliverer may be a better translation for that. And we see in our passage again that cycle of sin, suffering, supplication, and salvation. And so Israel has been cruelly oppressed, we're told, for 20 years. And key to that oppression is 900 iron chariots, the panzers of the ancient world. Now, this is a male-dominated culture then and now. Throughout history, males have dominated culture, and we know this. And in fact, our male-dominated culture has taken one single passage from the New Testament, maybe two, that talks about women being silent in church, and has completely ignored people like Deborah, Elizabeth, Mary, and Mary, a lot of Marys, Anna, Chloe, Priscilla, Esther, Huldah, Zephira, Miriam, and many other women that are implied that were women who spoke up. In fact, if you read through the Gospel of Matthew, throughout, the disciples are shown, the men, as the ones who don't get it, and often there's a foil afterwards of women who do get it. Very controversial for its time and space. I personally was raised by a strong woman. She grew up being a tomboy. And scandal of scandals, in the 50s and 60s, she decided she was going to wear pants when she went out and played instead of a dress. And this was encouraged. She grew up racing the other boys on bicycles and climbing trees in a time when women were supposed to be quiet and demure. But my grandmother wasn't. She was demure in her own way, but she wasn't quiet. She was a strong woman as well. My dad, when my sisters started to drive, he taught them how to change the oil in their car in the 80s. And how to change a tire in case they broke down. No different than how he taught me when I started to learn. And women today still face a lot of disparities. The arc has moved forward, but it certainly isn't full. There's a huge wage income gap. Women are generally paid 84 cents per every dollar a man makes. And we know that women are mistreated in our culture and often not listened to. Nearly as many as 1 in 4 women in America experience physical violence. 50% face verbal aggression on a regular basis. 1 in 5 sexual assault. And those are just the statistics for intimate relationships. That doesn't include strangers and random attacks. The United Methodist Church began fully ordaining women in 1956, well ahead of many, but not early enough. In 1956, women were already serving as leaders in the church, but they just couldn't be fully ordained. You know, roll your eyes at that. You can do the job, but we're just not going to honor you the same as we do men. But thank goodness we corrected that in 1956. Of course, that didn't mean the stigma was gone. There was still an uphill battle, and I can remember entering ministry early in my life. A lot of the women were of a particular character. They were kind of hard to get along with. And I sat there and thought about that, and I heard the old guard talking about how difficult they were, and then I realized it would take a tough woman to go into a man's job. And it gained a particular personality type that cut the way for pastors to follow. I was so excited when I came to this church several years ago, knowing I had an associate who was a woman pastor. And I miss that dynamic. We have great women on our staff, and so we still have that in a sense, but we don't have that regular female voice preaching. And I really appreciated that. And it's healthy for us. There are things that Pastor Nikki would see that I would never see as a man. Many of you women know what it is like to leave Kroger late at night and get your keys ready. I have no clue what that feels like. Or to wonder, is that man following me or just happens to be near me? I don't know those feelings. And men, we don't know those feelings of being on guard all the time. And we don't know the feeling of people just assuming we don't know and mansplaining to us. Deborah is leading God's people in an ancient world. How strong must this woman be? She's even considered a prophet. We're told that she sits under the tree of Deborah. We're not sure if it became known as that, and so through the stories they would point to this region and area because of Deborah's name, or if it was called that, and Deborah became known as that because she sat and prophesied in that area. We're not quite certain, but the point is that this place is defined by her leadership in a lot of ways. And as she speaks with Barak, we have maybe the earliest recorded history of mansplaining that happens here. She tells him, all right, you need to get 10,000 men from this tribe and this tribe, and I want you to go up on Mount Tabor. And we'll talk about why that's significant in a little bit. And Barak says, wait a minute, Deborah, you just don't understand. Let me explain to you what I know as the commander of the Lord's army. Here's what I know. They outnumber us. They have 900 iron chariots. They have bronze weapons. We have pitchforks and spears and pruning hooks. I get what you're saying, Deborah, and it's bold and it's brave, but it just won't work. But, hey, if you want to come with me. And her response, surely I will. So women have faced mansplaining for a long time. I looked for some legitimate, there's a lot of funny ones out there, but I looked for some legitimate mansplaining experiences. And I found a couple that I think you'll enjoy. And I share these because, men, we need to be aware that sometimes we make assumptions that just aren't correct. Amy Patrick is an architectural professor who one of her new freshman students was mansplaining to her the difference between pre-test stressed and post-stressed concrete. I don't know the difference there. And not only was he explaining that to her, He was in an architectural class for, you guessed it, concrete design. Janice Hansen was visiting a rehearsal for a new play, and she suggested that a particular character speak their dialogue in a certain way, a light and humorous way. The director, the male director, explained to her, "You don't understand this play. Let me explain to you the motivation behind these characters." She wrote the play. These are called microaggressions. And they're funny to laugh at in isolated events, but if you go through your day being treated like an idiot, it wears you down. And we live in a culture that subconsciously does this. Lutheran pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber was raised in a very fundamental home that belittled the role of women in a lot of ways. And because of that, she left that restrictive childhood, and as many will do who are in an oppressive home, she sprung out and engaged in all kinds of risky behavior that she expresses herself. She became a comedian trying to make it, and as she was searching to be a comedian, she also found a couple other things along the way, which was addiction and alcoholism. After her life was hitting rock bottom, she found again, and in a fresh way, the God who loved her and valued her as much as any man. And along her journey, she discovered that she had a voice to speak to a community of rough and tumble people that would not listen to the clean and prettied up. And it amazes me that today, in 2025, there are still those who would say, "You can't be a pastor, Nadia, because you're a woman." 900 iron chariots. It looks indomitable. It looks impossible to overcome. Who are these peasant people, these low-tech individuals who worship Yahweh, to overcome the might of Sisera's army? 900 iron chariots. Barak knew they would decimate them. Barak knew they would cut them to ribbons. But I'll hand it to him, even though he questioned Deborah, in the end he listens to her. And they're told to go to Mount Tabor. And now this is why this is important information, because Mount Tabor would have been, it was a place of Yahweh worship. This is before Jerusalem and the temple. And this was a known place for worship. It was also a high location. So if you're gathering 10,000 men on that hillside, you wouldn't have a lot of time to gather it before your oppressors, someone in the community went, "Oh, I see what's going on there," and ran to tell Sisera's army. It was a bad idea by all accounts. Barak knew this, but Deborah knew God. So Sisera's army comes out with their 900 iron chariots rumbling the ground. A sight to see in the ancient world, typically pulled by 4 to 6 horses. Well-trained warriors, heavy armor on chariots. And then something begins to happen. We read about it in the poem shared about this victory in chapter 5. The heavens begin to open up. And these 10,000, 20,000 men waiting on this hilltop, the place of worship of Yahweh, begin to feel a little bit of a sprinkle. And then they hear a rumbling of thunder, louder than the chariots. And then the clouds open up and a rain shower pours. What do you think happens to 900 iron chariots as they try and rush up a muddy hill bank? We're told they fell into disarray. And because Barak wouldn't trust Deborah or God by proxy without some evidence, She says, you're going to lose the glory. And so Sisera flees. He goes to a tent where a woman, knowing what's going on and seeing the tide turning while he rests, takes a tent peg. You guys know the story. And with a hammer drives it through his temple until he's nailed to the ground. The author wants you to know this is not a weak woman who just happened to pull it off. She's strong. She's making a point. And this whole story screams, don't underestimate women. The other point it makes for all of us is this. Don't overestimate the 900 chariots in your life. Some of you hear them rumbling down the tracks right now, or you're living with it, and you're not sure how to overcome it. But God has ways we don't understand. A little bit of rain, a sling, and a rock to overcome the mightiest of warriors, a virus to decimate an encamping army. We don't know how deliverance will come, but we know the one who brings the deliverance. And we're called to know him better than we know the things we fear.